Welcome to Natural Habitat Adventures, Daily Dose of Nature. I'm your host, Sunny Vanderstar. Today's topic is Know Before You Go, East Greenland Arctic Adventure. And it will be presented by our fabulous NatHab expedition leader, Mark Jordahl. Mark, thank you so much for being here today. I always look forward to when you present, and this topic looks absolutely fascinating. I'm dying to get to Greenland one day, so please take us there now.
All right, thank you, Sunny. I'd love to have you there sometime. First off, just want to apologize. I'm a little sick today, so if my voice gives out at any point, that's why. But I'll do my best here, and I'll be drinking some tea along the way to help out. Yeah, I'm really excited to be presenting about our Greenland trip. And for those who have joined, the idea of these Know Before You Go webinars are really to get into the nuts and bolts of the trip. It's not quite the same overview or inspirational kind of webinar that a lot of our daily doses tend to be. This is really an opportunity for people who are booked on the trip to ask some questions about what kind of pants or boots should I wear, that sort of thing. But hopefully there will be enough in here that's also for those of you who are not yet booked to inspire you to choose to join us in East Greenland. One of the things that for me is the most exciting about our Greenland trip is, let's see, is that advancing? It doesn't seem to be. There we go. Greenland is really the most wild and remote place that most of us will ever go in our lives. It's the largest island in the world. It's about 3 times the size of Texas, and it only has 57,000 people in it. And most of those people live on the West Coast, and our camp is over on the East Coast, where only about 3,000 people live. So it's a 12,000-mile coastline, and there are only about 3,000 people living spread across that. And you can kind of see on this map all of these inlets and fjords. That's the entire coastline of Greenland is about the same as the circumference of the Earth, which is it's a lot of nooks and crannies there. Again, our camp is here in the southeast, and we're right near the town of Tislac, which has about 2,000 of those 3,500 people, which makes a nice convenient kickoff spot for us where we can get some of the cultural experiences. When you hear about people going to Greenland, you might hear your friends talking about it. Most of them have been on a cruise to the west side of Greenland, around the capital Nuuk and up along the coast. Very few people ever make it over to the east side where we are. And in fact, the people who live in West Greenland call East Greenland the backside. That's how remote it is. And you can see why there are so few people in Greenland when you look at this 2-mile thick clump of ice in the middle of it. Ice covers about 80% of the island. So what life and, both people and wildlife exists there has to happen right along the shoreline or in the water in the case of the marine life. And you can see along here this white that comes down the East Coast. This is why the East Coast is so remote. This is ice. And you can see that the entire southwestern shore is clear of ice already, but the east side still has ice. And it was almost 200 years between when the Danish colonized the west and when they made it over to the east. So the area we go to really is remote. It really is out there. And specific cultures have developed there because of that. If you think about having to survive off the land in such an extreme environment, it's really impressive the ways of life and the technologies that people developed in order to survive in what we see as a pretty inhospitable environment. It can be 50 below and really cold in the winter with huge, they're called Peterak winds coming off the ice sheet. And also some of those cultural pieces are things that we aren't necessarily used to and might be a little bit uncomfortable for us. And it's really important on this trip that we leave our judgments behind and open ourselves up to learning about this place. And again, the people who have figured out ways to survive in this extreme environment. On the left here is a seal skin. When we're in the towns, you will see seal skins drying on people's railings. You might see a whale carcass up on shore that's been hunted. Something that we might not feel terribly comfortable with, but that has, again, allowed people to survive for thousands of years in this extreme environment. We will see a lot of sled dogs, especially in the town of Tissilac. And dogs there are very much working dogs. They're not pets. They're considered semi-feral. You don't go up and pet them. And they are left outside year round. And again, we're used to having our dogs on our couch with us. Dogs there are working dogs, and they're very happy and comfortable when it's 50 degrees below and they're covered with snow. But it is a bit of a mental shift. And you will see signs of kind of trash and alcohol in the towns, which is sort of some of the unfortunate side of the colonial influence that has happened. Another thing about this trip is, of all of our trips, this really is the most expeditionary. Every day is determined by the weather, by the ice, by the winds. This is the Sermelik Fjord here. There are times when you can't cross it because there's too much ice. If the wind and the tides are going in the same direction and ice backs up in there, you might have a beautiful clear day where you can cross the fjord with no problem. Sometimes it's like this picture on the left here, so foggy that you're creeping along at 2 miles an hour in the Zodiac. It might be raining. It might even be snowing in the middle of summer. And our choices of what we do every day are really determined by the weather conditions more than almost anything else. So to join this expedition, you have to have a little bit of a go with the flow attitude. You know, there's always something we can do. There's always something to explore. Every place you go is amazing here. It's just we tend to talk about this trip more in terms of strategies than plans. If you try to make a plan, nature's going to laugh at you, and you have to fall back on your strategy and just figure out another cool place to explore. To set the expectations around wildlife, it tends to not be a really wildlife-rich trip. We often see whales, humpback whales, minke whales, fin whales, occasionally some seals, harbor seals, bearded seals, Arctic foxes on occasion. Polar bears are one animal that we really hope not to see on this trip. If you want to see polar bears, I highly recommend you go on one of our Churchill trips. Because most of our exploration is done on foot on the landscape in this trip, we prefer not to see polar bears. And we generally don't. We go to places where we don't expect to see them, but we are always prepared for them. But again, we're NatHab, so we're always looking out and seeking out wildlife encounters. But don't expect an Africa-style safari where you're just surrounded by wildlife all the time. So now kind of getting into the itinerary and the nuts and bolts of the trip. We do start this trip in Reykjavik. This is a brand new hotel called the Hotel Reykjavik Saga that was just built last July. So it's going to be a brand new one for us, right in the heart of downtown Reykjavik. And if you've never been to Reykjavik, it's a wonderful, very metropolitan, vibrant downtown core that's easily walkable. From our hotel, you can really get to all the main shopping and museums and parks. It's a great town to explore. So I definitely recommend adding in some days either before or after to spend some time exploring there. I'm not going to go into a whole lot in Reykjavik in this presentation because I figure most of the questions you might have are going to be about the Greenland piece. So we do fly out of Keflavik Airport, which is about 45 minutes from downtown Reykjavik, over to Kulasuk. You can see it's about an hour and 15-minute flight to get over to our landing pad in Greenland. This is the airstrip in Kulasuk. Again, Greenland and especially East Greenland are very remote. And I don't know if you can tell from this picture, but one thing that is missing is a control tower. There's not Planes don't come in using signals from the control tower. They don't come in using instruments. It's all line of sight for landings and takeoffs. So again, back to this expedition mentality. If this is cloudy, which it often is, if it's heavy winds over about 45 miles an hour, our plane might not take off from Reykjavik on the schedule that we planned. So it's not uncommon to have an extra day or two in Reykjavik before we're able to make it over and land in Kulasuk. But assuming we make it across, if you look right down here, Kulasuk, where we land, is in the bottom right, and then Tisilak, which is where we spend the first couple days in Greenland, is about a 10 to 15 minute helicopter flight. Great little chance to start flying over, seeing some of the icebergs, seeing some of the mountains and landscapes. Greenland, again, is just incredibly rugged. It's been scraped bare by ice. It's hard for things to grow there. So if you're somebody like me who just loves wild, rugged, hard landscapes, there's no place like it on the planet. And then we end up in the cute little town of Tisilak. So about 2,000 people live in this town. It was settled in the 1880s, so it's been around for a little while. And this is where a lot of the kids from the surrounding settlements will come in to go to school. And we have a couple of nice days here to explore and really start to get a sense of the living, modern Inuit Greenlander culture here. This is our hotel, the Hotel Amosalik. The lodging here in Greenland is basic. The rooms are comfortable, they're warm, they're nothing fancy, but who cares? Because that's your view out the window. You're here for Greenland, not for the room. You can see this beautiful soccer pitch here that was put in by the Danish government. There are always kids playing out there, even until midnight, because it's still light most of the time that we're there. Just a lot of activity, a pretty vibrant town, and we get a lot of time to walk around the town. It's very hilly. You can see just from the hotel, we're definitely looking down on the town, down to the water. But when we're walking around town, we always have the option of vehicles that can pick people up and move them from one place to the other. So you're never forced to do more walking than you're prepared for while we're in the town. The food at the Amosalik is also, not what you're there for. It's pretty basic, a lot of fried. And part of that is just here, this bay here, it's called King Oscar Fjord, freezes up for most of the year. And this town gets 3 supply ships every year. One at the end of June is the first one to come in. So right now, they can't wait to get some fresh vegetables, some candy, things like that. They're running out of the supplies that came in last summer. Then they'll have one in midsummer and then one somewhere around August or September, maybe into October, and that's it for the rest of the year. So there's definitely a shortage of fresh foods in the hotels here. So keep your expectations of the food reasonable here, and trust me, it really improves once we get out to camp. While we are in Tisilak, we have the opportunity to do a lot of walking around. Our first afternoon, since we've flown from Reykjavik, flown on the helicopter from Kulasuk, we like to get out, stretch our legs. This is a beautiful walk up what's called the Valley of Flowers, just right behind town, an easy kind of a warm-up walk. We take it nice and slow, goes up to a beautiful waterfall, and again, lots of flowers to look at along the way, but just a chance to really sink in and be like, yeah, I'm in Greenland, this is amazing. This is a new activity. We had been getting over the last couple of years a lot of requests from people who actually want to get up onto the ice. And sometimes it worked out on a helicopter flight to stop. Usually it didn't. So now we've built this into the trip. It's a guided glacier walk. We have guides, an operator there in Tisilak who will be leading us. They do provide crampons. So I had a question in advance about bringing yak tracks on this trip. you don't need to. Most of our hiking is on rock, not ice. And for this one situation where we are walking on ice, they are providing crampons for us. We also get to see some Greenlander carvings. You never know how many people are going to be working in the shop at this time and how many are not. But we usually try to work it out so that we can go while carvers are actively working in there. You have the opportunity to buy some of the carvings directly from those carvers. So that's kind of a cool experience. And one thing that's kind of funny about this shop, you can see it's called Stunk. Kunst is the word for art in Danish. And this workshop was shipped over from Denmark as sort of a put together kit. And it got there and none of the people in town knew what it was supposed to say. So they just threw the letters up there and now it's known as Stunk's Workshop. This is a great little museum in Tisilac. In the front there, you can see a traditional sod house, a model of a traditional sod house. One of the things that's amazing about traveling in East Greenland is that most of the people that you come across who are over 65 years old, they grew up on the land in one of these sod houses. So if you think about how far back in your own lineage you probably have to go to find a hunter-gatherer, it's probably quite a ways back. Here, it's 60 years. There's a Inuit guy in town who says we've gone from the Stone Age to the iPhone age in 100 years. So it's, we really do get into and learn about the local culture on this trip. All right, and then we head out to base camp after our couple nights in Tisilac. This is the boat that we take to camp. It's about a 4.5 hour ride. As you can see, the boat's enclosed. It has restrooms on it. It's very comfortable. There are padded seats inside and tables so that we're able to have snacks and drinks along the way. And also on this trip, you start to get some close-up views of icebergs. We very frequently see whales on this trip. Of course, can't guarantee anything, but it's a great scenic sightseeing way to get out to camp. And then after 4.5 hours of suspense building, we get out to our base camp, which is just in a spectacular location, as you can see. The idea behind this was to build a luxury safari camp like you might find in the Serengeti, but to do it in the Arctic. And there really isn't any other place like this. We have 8 cabins out there, and then a separate dining and cooking tent, and a separate shower tent that's divided into men's and women's sides. Each cabin has its own deck, and you never really feel like you get enough time here at camp because we're going out, we're doing a lot of stuff. All activities are optional, and sitting on your deck enjoying this view does count as an activity. So you might choose to take an afternoon off to just stay at the camp and just enjoy this incredible scene. This is inside the cabins. Each cabin, we don't have any cabins with queen or double-sized beds. They're all twin setups. Each cabin has its own heater and has its own dry toilet. So not with running water. You'll learn more about it when you get there, but everything you need is right there in your cabin. You're not having to go out to an outhouse in the middle of the night or anything like that. So the cabins are remarkably comfortable for their location. And then we have the yurt, which is known as the Explorer's Corner. And this is where we do a lot of our group gatherings. We'll do happy hours there in the evenings. It's where your expedition leader will do presentations. And it's also just open to you 24 hours a day if you just want to sit and relax and enjoy yourself. Again, just a very comfortable, nice place to be. And as I said, the food definitely upgrades as you get out to camp compared to what you have in Tisilac. It's incredible to me what the chefs put out as meals, again, from this very remote kitchen We are able to bring in fresh food on our helicopters and when we fly across. So people often leave remarking on the food just being an incredible highlight of this trip. Right, and what do we do all day? A lot of what we do is explore. Again, this is expedition. We can just kind of decide, oh, the weather's doing this today, the winds are doing this. We know about a bunch of hikes. Let's go to this one. Let's go to this one. But in the Surmulek Fjord, it's actually, Surmulek means the place of ice. So anytime we're crossing the fjord, there's just incredible iceberg viewing all around us. So incredible opportunities for photography and just sitting and watching these cathedral shapes floating down the fjord. This is where our local drivers come in. This is Aku on the left and Frederick on the right. Aku is actually a West Greenlander. Frederick is Danish, but married to a Greenlandic woman. They live in the local community and know this ice so well. And when it comes down to it, these guys are the bosses. You know, we as expedition leaders like to pretend that we are, but if these guys say, no, the ice is no good, we're not going there, we're not going there. They just know how the water, the winds, the tides, they know these areas so well. So we really trust them. We trust their judgment, and we work with them to figure out the best plan for every day. And if you look up behind them, that is the Greenland ice sheet. And you can actually see that from our camp. So it's, you know, this is a living climate change laboratory. So conversations about climate change definitely come up. And it's with climate change being, excuse the pun, but it's a hot topic right now. It's amazing to really just be on the front lines of it and experience this place. We do a lot of hiking. And this picture is a little bit deceptive because there's a trail. This is actually back in the Valley of Flowers. Most of the hiking that we do, and this is important to think about, is off trail. We're walking across hummocks and uneven ground. We might be climbing up over rocks or going across a scree field. So that's something to think about in terms of your own physical abilities and what you choose to do and choose not to participate in. You know, those of you who have been on NatHab trips with hikes before, often we're able to split the group, or you can just kind of sit and wait for the group to come back. That doesn't work in polar bear country. Your expedition leader, when we're hiking, will always have a firearm that they're carrying, so they kind of need to have their hands free for that. And it's not an option to just head back early or to sit by the side of the trail and wait for the group to come back. So it is really important to be comfortable hiking off trail in uneven ground. And we do provide hiking poles, so you don't have to worry about bringing those. But yeah, do be prepared for the hiking to primarily take place off trail. We also do kayaking, and the opportunity to kayak around and through icebergs is pretty incredible. And I want to also, with that, talk about kind of our decision-making process on this trip. Again, because it is so remote, we often make kind of conservative decisions. We really always have safety in mind, because if something goes wrong out here, it's a long way to get help. So when we're kayaking, we're keeping a really safe distance from those icebergs. When you look at that mountain of ice and realize that 90% of it is under the surface of the water, if that thing rolls, there's a lot of ice that could come up towards you. Or if it calves, there's a nice wave that can come towards you. So we're very cautious, we're very careful, and all of our expedition leaders who lead this trip are very skilled in these environments. So you're in very good hands. But if you're ever like, oh, I just wish we could go farther up this fjord, or I really want to get closer to this iceberg for a better picture, or I want to go through this archway in this iceberg. If your expedition leader says no, there's a good reason for it. We just really want to make sure that everybody stays safe and has a great trip. All right, some more of the nuts and bolts. So weather you could get it all. It could snow on us. You could be sweating in a t-shirt. We could get rain for hours. We can get fog, like you saw in that one earlier picture. You really do have to be prepared for anything. We do go out, even if it's pouring rain, we will go out hiking because we're out there to explore. But you definitely want to be wearing layers, wool or polypropylene base layers, and then fleece layers, potentially down on top of that, and then a shell or raincoat. And in the next slide, I'll start to show you some of the equipment that we provide, which takes care of some of that. But you really want to think about layers, because you can start out the morning in frost, and when you were out on the Zodiacs, you're basically boating around in a giant glass of ice water, and it gets cold with the wind and all the icebergs and everything. And then we'll get out of the Zodiacs and we'll start hiking, and if the sun's out, you could be sweating very quickly. So it's a wide range, but definitely come prepared for anything. Footwear, somebody had asked if you need to bring rubber boots like wellies. You don't, but it's definitely recommended to wear waterproof hiking boots. Just some Gore-Tex light hikers are fine. Again, that's something that's going to give you some ankle support for those off-trail hikes, and waterproof, because we do walk through some kind of marshy, mushy areas. Just something, and please make sure they're broken in, that you've worn them on some hikes before coming on this trip, because it can really slow you down if you're getting blisters or anything like that. But yeah, don't worry about overdoing it. You don't need snow boots. You don't need big rubber boots. Just a pair of Gore-Tex or other waterproof light hikers is going to serve you well. And while we're at camp, NatHab provides Crocs for just something comfortable to wear walking around camp. So you don't need to bring extra casual shoes for that. Other equipment that we provide, hiking poles. Again, you don't need to bring your own. We will provide those. Head nets, so mosquitoes and midges, flies, things like that. It's hard to guess whether or not you're going to have to deal with those things. We provide head nets for everyone. Mosquitoes are an issue for about a week. Midges are an issue for about a week, but you never know when that week's going to land. It completely depends on what the weather is doing. The 3 weeks that I was there, it was never an issue last year. But again, we have those available if you would like them. For kayaking, we have dry suits, booties, and gloves. I'll have a slide on that in a second. And then Mustang suits for the Zodiac rides. What's a Mustang suit? These are survival suits that really, when we're out on those Zodiacs, it's nice to have those on. Keeps you nice and warm, keeps you dry, even if it's pouring rain. And they're floatable, so you don't have to be wearing a PFD or a life jacket over these. They're also known as survival suits. So if, very unlikely to happen, but if for some reason you ended up in the water, you'd still be okay in one of these suits. They're incredibly insulated, thick, warm, and weatherproof. And then for kayaking, we have these dry suits. And again, if you end up in the water, your clothes underneath will still stay dry and keep you warm. Julius here is just choosing to stand in the water with it. But we have that. We provide the PFDs, neoprene booties, and then neoprene gloves or pogies, which are kind of these covers for a regular pair of gloves that goes around your paddle. And the first day we arrive in camp, we basically arrive, we get oriented to the camp by the staff there, and we have lunch, and then we get fitted out for all the gear. So that first afternoon might feel a little bit logistics heavy, but if we just take care of the dry suits and the Mustang suits right off the bat, you have those for the next few days while we're out there. We don't have to worry about it anymore. And then we try to get out and do some paddling that first afternoon. All right, and then once we leave camp, at the end of our stay there, we go to this little town called Kulusuk, which is where we flew into. It all depends on weather and availability of the helicopters, we will either come back on one of the boats, either the boat we came in on, or there are a couple other options, or we'll take a helicopter from camp back to Kulisuk. But last summer there was only one helicopter servicing all of East Greenland. So there were some limitations on what could be provided. I don't know what will be available next summer, but you'll either come back by boat or helicopter. Again, it's incredible for us in the US to kind of get our heads around the resource limitations in this area. It's hard to get things in. This is, I don't know why it says kayaking, but this is our hotel in Kulisuk. It's walking distance from both the town of Kulisuk and the airstrip. So generally on the morning that we leave, what people choose to do is that we send all the bags to the airport in a van, and then most of us walk. You can always ride the van too. Depending on when we arrive here the day before we leave, people often choose to walk into town. There's a nice museum there. There's some other things to do. So it's very walkable, easy to get everywhere. No real concerns of polar bears right here, so it's fine to just walk into town. And we do our final dinner here before the next day when we fly back to Reykjavik. And really, even though we travel back to Reykjavik together, and at least one of your ELs will make sure everybody gets back to the hotel and everything. Essentially, we do the final dinner, and it feels like the trip has kind of come to completion here in Kulisuk. And then we fly back to Reykjavik. All right. So yeah, I wanted to kind of just leave plenty of time here for questions, because that's what this type of webinar is all about. So what do you have for me?
Thanks so much, Mark. I desperately want to go there someday. It looks so amazing.
Yeah.
Just like nothing else. It's so cool.
That's true.
But we have lots of questions, so let's go ahead and dig in.
Right.
Do any of the trips go to northern Greenland, or is it too inhospitable, unvisitor friendly?
None of our trips do. There are some other mostly cruise-based companies that do go to the north. And I know like Penant has an icebreaker ship that goes up there. Lindblad goes farther north than we do. Really, we consider ourselves to be a land-based company, even though we do have some, Galapagos and some other water-based trips. We really wanted to create a sense of settling into one place and getting to know this valley where our base camp is and the fjords that are right around it. So yeah, so our trips don't go farther north. We really, this is such an amazing area, and we really wanted to give that sense of place of sinking into where our base camp is.
And I love that about this trip, and I've heard that from past travelers, that's really special to kind of cultivate a sense of place and familiarity rather than running around to lots of different places.
Yeah, and it feels like home. After a few days, you're sad to leave. You love the camp staff, you love the Zodiac drivers. These dogs that you see in this picture live on an island just right across from camp. So yeah, you do kind of get attached.
So cool. Photography. I'm going to just coalesce a few questions and ask, what do you recommend people bring as far as camera with lenses, tripods, and even if you have a recommendation for the best smartphone for photography?
Right. Yeah, I'm not a great photographer myself. If you do a search on our nature blog, the Good Nature blog, you can do a search for Greenland photography, and Court has one on. It's called How to Get This Picture, and it's a daytime shot of an iceberg. What I will say is lens cameras are great. I had an iPhone 13 Pro Max on this last trip. All these pictures you see right here were taken on that iPhone. So any of the advanced cameras do have pretty good capabilities. I did find myself kind of after the fact wishing that I had brought my camera with lenses, and I will be this summer just to have some higher resolution images. It's worth going into a camera shop and asking what type of filters they would recommend. You know, so much water that a polarized filter is really good, and really understanding your camera's white balance, because these massive icebergs and the glaciers can kind of throw off your white balance, and you can end up with some kind of dingy pictures. So yeah, I wish I was a photography pro and could give a great answer to that. But I would definitely direct you to searching for Court's blog on taking iceberg images in daytime.
It's amazing what a smartphone can do these days. Those pictures are great. You are a photographer, Mark.
Oh, thanks.
Any possibility of seeing northern lights on this trip?
Maybe late in the season. So if you're kind of late August, early September, it's possible. But before that, we really never even see darkness.
Wow.
So,
okay.
Yeah. So just on those later ones.
All right. So tell us about those boat rides. Is seasickness generally an issue? Would you recommend people medicate prophylactically, or just have medication with them?
Yes, I would say if you know you're prone to seasickness, especially on that 4.5-hour ride to camp, a lot of people do better in kind of these smaller Zodiac situations than they do in the larger boats. And that boat that we do use, if the wind and waves are just right, it can roll a bit. So I would definitely recommend just have some Dramamine, take it before that long trip. And if you do know that you get seasick in smaller boats too, go ahead and take it for the Zodiac rides too. Those tend not to be too rough because the icebergs really break up the waves. It tends to be fairly calm within the Sermelik Fjord.
Okay. Are vegetarian meals in I'm going to say it wrong. Thank you. Is that an option?
Yeah, you can always put something together. So again, at camp, you're going to be set. They're going to take great care of you. In the hotels, there's always something. I'm not a full vegetarian. I'm a pescatarian. I was definitely getting a little bit tired of the meals, but it might be pickled vegetables. There's usually salad fixings. There's a lot of fried non-meat foods, so French fries. The breakfasts, you're totally fine. It's a lot of rolls and fruit and things like that. But yeah, there's always something you can eat, but it's maybe not what you would choose if you were at home. But you'll manage if you're a little flexible.
Sounds good. Can you tell us the length of a typical hike on this trip?
Yeah, they range quite a bit, and of course it somewhat depends on the group. I would say it's rare to go more than about 3 miles. If you have a really gung-ho group, there's certainly some great hikes that we could take, that might be 3 or 4 miles in and then the same amount back, but we usually don't hike for more than a few miles. But okay. Again, keep in mind that it is mostly off trail. It's going to be on uneven ground. It might be across hummocks, and some of it might be loose rock and kind of challenging terrain.
Okay. Is it possible to leave luggage in Reykjavik in the hotel?
Yes.
Okay, excellent.
Oh, and speaking of luggage, just I want to make sure this is in the pre-departure briefing. It hasn't been updated yet, but for the flight from Reykjavik to Kulasuk and back, you can only have 1 check bag and 1 carry-on. So, we think about commercial flights with 2 bags, but on that one, it's 1. And if you have an extra check bag, it's something like $120. So it's definitely best to pack into 1 check bag and 1 day bag.
Okay. And speaking of money, what currency is used in Greenland?
Danish kroner.
Okay. Is it feasible? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say there aren't that many times that you necessarily will need it, and you can, like at Stunks at the craft fair, you can pay in dollars. At the hotel gift shop, you can pay with a credit card. So credit cards are fairly widely used, and there's not a whole lot in Kulisuk or Tisilak in terms of commercial establishments. There are only a couple of grocery stores. There's that craft shop, but it's not like Reykjavik where you have a street with shops and everything. It's
Okay.
very simple living. Yeah.
Is it feasible to be taking pictures while kayaking?
Yeah. We have mostly doubles, one single, so it's pretty easy to kind of just communicate with the person that you're paddling with and say, hey, I'm going to stop paddling and take a picture. Can you keep us steady? So yes, and we do have dry bags that you can use while we're kayaking. So you can keep your camera in that while you're paddling and just pull it out when you want to stop and take a picture.
Okay. Can you talk about drinking water? Is that readily available, or how does that work?
Yeah. It's fine to drink the tap water in these towns, both Reykjavik, Kulisuk, Tisilak, and then out at camp we have each cabin has its own jug of drinking water, and then there's always drinking water available both in the yurt and in the dining cabin. So
Okay.
yeah, nothing to worry about there.
Great. Is there a post office where we're going?
That's funny. I don't actually know. I believe so. I've never actually gone to it. So if you can kind of catch who that was, I can try to find out and then send that out.
Sounds good. Will we see many other tourists during this trip?
We will see some when we're in Tisilak. There are definitely, on occasion, there are kind of these small cruise ships of about 100 people who will come in, and they'll be going to the museum, and we might see some of them around town. When we're taking the boat out to camp along the long fjord, we'll often see groups of kayakers pulled out and camping along the fjord there. And then occasionally when we're out on Surmulek Fjord, we might see a couple of whale watching boats, but there's never a time when there's a crowd of tourists at all. Only 5,000 people visit this region every year, so it's pretty spread out, and you never feel like you're in a crowd of tourists.
Got it. Is there internet at base camp?
So they're working on that. I would say plan on it being a nice escape from internet. They're trying a couple different things for this year. Last year there definitely wasn't. I would say plan on not having internet access for the time that we're out of camp.
Okay. What are the options for doing laundry?
Really, there is not an option while we're out at camp. So it's Reykjavik, Kulisuk, and Tisilak. You can have the hotels do them in all three of those places, and they can turn it around pretty quickly. They have washers and dryers, so it's not like you need multiple days for it to dry.
Okay. Is there an option for charging smartphones and other electronics?
Out at camp, yes. So that was another question that I gotten in advance. Nothing in your room, but the yurt has a whole charging station. So there are plenty of hookups for everybody to have their phones, cameras, everything charging overnight. And then frequently when we come back from one excursion in the middle of the day, people will plug in again while we're having lunch, and have everything charged up for an afternoon excursion. So yeah, definitely plenty of places to plug in the yurt.
Okay. Should guests bring water bottles or camelbacks?
Yes, definitely. Either one of those is great. You should be sent, once you sign up for the trip, you should be sent a water bottle from that hab that you can bring. We definitely are all about reusing and reusable water bottles rather than using plastic water bottles. A camelback would definitely be great for doing hikes. With with those and also your checked luggage, there's always the chance of things getting wet, getting rained on. You know, there are a lot of transfers on this trip, from the airplane to the helicopter to the airport, in and out of the hotels, to on and off boats when we get out to base camp. So either something that is waterproof by itself, or you can use contractor grade trash bags or trash compactor bags and line your duffel bag or suitcase with that, just to keep the things inside dry. In terms of your day pack, again, while we're out at camp, you always have access to dry bags that you can use, or you can do the same thing. Just line your regular day pack with something plastic and fill it up. I have a waterproof duffel bag and day pack, just, you know, I'm in wet places often enough that it makes it easier.
Okay, great. Can you go through a typical day at base camp? What activities, lunch breaks, like how that looks?
Typical day. It's a funny term out of base camp. Yeah, so there's coffee available at the yurt starting around 6:30 or 7. We don't do super early starts. It's not like we're on an African safari where we have to be out by 6 or anything like that. Breakfast, I think, is right around 7:30. And then a lot of times we will meet up for the first outing around 9, 8:30, 9, kind of depending on the group and what the plan is for the day and what the tides are doing. If it's a big day, like where we cross Sermelek Fjord into Johan Petersen Sound, though that day we'll be out all day. It'll take, you know, an hour and a half just to get across the sound, or across the Sermelek Fjord and into the sound. We'll stop at a glacier overlook, then we'll go up to this island called Bad Island and do a hike, and we'll really be out all day, and get back around in time for happy hour, so around 5 at the end of the day. We do have bathroom kits with us at all times, so we have shovels and bags to pack stuff out. So yeah, bathrooms do happen out on the land on this trip. Sometimes, like with the kayaking days, we might go out in the morning, kayak for a couple of hours through the icebergs, come back, and then in the afternoon there's a beautiful hike just right up behind camp. Or we might get in the Zodiacs again and do a 2 or 3 hour excursion up Sermelek Fjord. There are some old cultural sites, some old sod houses on the land that we might stop to look at. But yeah, the days really vary. Again, it's an expedition more than almost any other trip that we run, if not any other trip that we run. Each day is just determined by wind, weather, tides, ice, the interests of the group. But yeah, either it's going to be usually just one big day where we're out all day, and then the other days will be half days excursions with lunch back at the camp.
Okay, great. Circling back to electronics, are the plugs or the outlets compatible with US plugs,
Yes.
both in Greenland and in Iceland? Yeah.
That's one I might need to check on too, to be sure. Definitely Greenland, fine with 2-prong US plugs,
Okay.
not 3-prong. Camp is all US plugs, but Iceland I'll have to check.
Yeah, it sounds like some of our past travelers are chiming in that Iceland, you would need some adapters.
Okay.
They use our European electrical stuff. What about a CPAP machine? Is that something they should leave at home, or is that a possibility to use at base camp?
As long as it's one that doesn't need to be kept plugged in. So as long as it's battery powered and rechargeable, you could be recharging it during the day in the yurt and using it at night in your cabin. But again, there's no power in the cabins.
Okay, sounds good. I think we have time for one more question. Let's talk birds. Are there birds there? Will we see many birds?
I wouldn't say many. There definitely seabirds. You're going to see Iceland gulls, glaucous gulls, greater and lesser black-backed gulls, see some eider ducks, squaws, Jaegers, wheat ears on the land, but it's not a heavy tons of birds kind of a trip.
Mhm.
Again, this is very much it's a landscape trip, and the wildlife that we see is a bonus.
Sounds fabulous. Couple more comments I just want to share from our past travelers. There is a report that there are post offices in both towns.
Great.
So you can mail some letters there, and just want to pass on from one of our past travelers that did this trip in 2017. It is absolutely amazing. Do not be intimidated by it. We felt completely safe the whole time. The ELs and all the base camp staff are the best. Highly recommend this trip. So we will end there, and I will turn it back to you for some closing comments.
I think you just read my closing comments. What else is there to say? Yeah, I mean, again, just to reiterate, this is literally probably the most remote and wild place that any of us will ever go. It's a true expedition. We do it in style. You're comfortable the whole way. You're in good hands. It has it all. It has the, both the cultural and the natural fascination around you all the time. So yeah, it's really a once in a lifetime, and hopefully more than once in a lifetime opportunity. It's one that last year was my first season working it, and I've been literally thinking about it all year, and I can't wait to get back there this summer.
Well, thank you again, Mark, for sharing your knowledge and passion with us. And I want to thank everybody who tuned in today. Please join us again tomorrow for our next Daily Dose of Nature. You can check out this week's lineup, including registration links, on our website at nathab.com/webinars. We did record today's presentation, and we will have the replay available on our website soon. With that, I'll conclude the webinar. Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.